Hi, at a recent Dublin modular meetup, I was showcasing this case which I put together to make techno along with my Synthstrom Deluge. And in today's video, we're going to go through how I set up the case, why I chose these modules, and more importantly, how to put them all together and use them with your Deluge if you have one to make some really gritty techno. So let's get started. Now we have to connect the Deluge up to the modular. So how are we going to do that? Well, the easiest way is to use the CV and gate outputs that are already built into the Deluge. I go into settings here, just shift and press select, navigate down to gate, go to output 4, select that, and you see I have it set to clock. That means I've turned gate 4 into a clock. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to mult that into here because we are going to use that to clock this sequencer here, the chasing lights. I go back to T-clock settings on the Deluge, and I go to the out one. The PPQN, the pulses per quarter note, is set to 4. So let's watch what happens. I hit play and the sequencer is running here now because we have a clock coming in. Now if I was to change that to 2, you would see my sequencer would slow down, go up to 8, sequencer goes really fast. Now how are we going to get the audio out of the modular? So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to take the audio out of the line output here on my Erica Pico out, and I'm going to go into the line input on the Deluge. Now I could just go straight into my mixer for this video, but when I was setting this up in a live setting, I only had a pair of stereo outs, so I had to mix everything in the Deluge. You can create an audio track, and the audio track's input is set to be this guy here. So whatever audio comes in here gets mixed in with the audio on the Deluge and then gets sent out the stereo outs here into the mixer and then into your ears. So we will start off with the Instruo Ts-L here. I'm going to use it as my first voice, and I'm going to sequence it from the chasing light sequencer. The other thing you would need is a VCA so that the audio that comes out of here, and we're going to use the pulse width modulated waveform. I'm going to feed it into the VCA here in QARV, and we can take the output of that and we will feed it into the audio input here on the FX8. I'm going to patch the audio output of the FX8 here up into channel 1. Let's use blue so we can keep track of who's who here. So channel 1, we turn all the other ones down, is going to be the Ts-L. Now the QARV is a great module for giving you LFOs and VCAs, and so I'm going to have this in trigger mode, which means when it gets a trigger, it will actually open the VCA using the envelope parameters you've defined here. Let's go ahead and patch the output of the sequencer A into the trigger input here. Now when we hit play, I'd like to filter that first, so I'm going to patch that through Steve's MS22 from ThreeTomModular. This has got a high pass and a low pass filter, or low pass and high pass filter in series, and you can kind of cut between them using the spread knob here, and you can overdrive the filter with the skein knob. But the real fun part is it's actually got a mod matrix built into it. You see now I'm just adjusting the envelope here, so this is all very playable straight away. We're going to use the Sequins sequencer here, my favorite little sequencer mode. I've used it an awful lot in a lot of videos, so go take a look. I'll include some links down below to my tutorials on it. And I've set up sequencer 1 in Dorian scale, and what I've done is I've edited the scale map. You'll see here, I've taken out 2 of the notes, so as this rotates, we're going to get an interesting melodic effect because we're changing the scale mapping, and simply by doing that alone we can create different melodies without changing the sequence. We will take the output here of the trigger in, and we're going to use that to clock sequencer A, and then I will use this longer patch cable here, and I'm going to use that to go into the 1 volt per octave input on the Ts-L. So now I can adjust the, see how I'm doing that? create a triplet effect, so I can have some fun with this. And we can add in a little bit of drums. Not bad at all. Not bad at all. So we're beginning to get the framework set up here now for our track. You're seeing how things are beginning to work. Now I want to bring in the BIA and the Manis Iteratis as the second and third voice. So we're going to use the CV and gate outputs on the Deluge as the sequencing outputs to control them. Now let's take a quick look at how the Deluge does this. This is CV1 and 2 output, which will send pitch information if you create CV tracks in the sequencer. And these are gates 1 and 2, which will create gates or triggers for each note that gets played. So I'm going to use gate 1 with CV1 to trigger the BIA, and gate 2 with CV2 to trigger and send pitch information to the Manis Iteratis. I'm going to go over to the Deluge, and in my controlling song here, I've created a CV track CV1 and another track CV2. CV1 is going to correspond to the BIA, and I've turned on the arpeggiator, so let's just take a listen. Over here on CV track 2, this corresponds, remember, to the Manis. So now we know that our Manis is patched up correctly as well. So with that, let's take a listen now as we actually just play that with a little bit of percussion. Let's go over and take a listen to what the sequencer for Manis sounds like. Now, the other little thing I want to fix is a mistake I made earlier when I was setting this up. I patched the output of QARV here for the clock into Ornament and QARV. That won't work. That'll only work if this envelope is short enough to trigger. But if you go for very long envelopes, it'll stop working. So let's just go right ahead and fix that by, first of all, patching the output of sequencer A. Remember, we're using that to clock the sequencer here into this mult. I am going to patch that then over into the clock for sequence, and I'm also going to patch that into the trigger input here for the envelope for the Ts-L. So if we just take a listen now. First thing I want to do is I want to modulate this PWM here on the output of the Ts-L. Let's take a listen. So we can very quickly just modulate that. Let's use an output of oct here. We're going to patch it into this smartverter, which is a offset and attenuverter. Let me scale up the or shift the voltage up in level, and at the same time also attenuvert it a bit. Now, what if I want to add some more rhythmic modulation to the sounds I'm getting out of these modules? One of the nice things about Manis Iteratis, for example, is you can send a lot of modulation into it and it will change the sound quite dramatically. And rather than just modulating with an LFO that's moving, I want to modulate it with an envelope that I'm triggering using one of the sequencers here in Chasing Lights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to patch up sequencer B into the trigger input here on the second channel's envelope generator. I'm going to patch the output of that into the saw mod CV input on Manis Iteratis. Now, I can adjust the shape and size of the envelopes here and the frequency of the triggers here, or by changing the track length. So first of all, let's just listen again without the envelopes being sent in. And now let's send the envelopes in. And so you see, I'm just adding a little bit of movement, something a little extra, something a bit unusual. Like if I didn't want it, I would just turn off all of the steps here and get nothing. Then I could punch a few in on the step sequencer. And I could change the rhythm by changing the sequencer length. So you see what I'm doing? I'm playing around with rhythmic elements layered on top of the actual melody itself that are driving modulation. Let's do the same thing by modulating the filter rhythmically. I'm going to use sequencer C here to send in triggers to the third channel here, channel 3. I'm going to take that envelope out. I'm going to patch it into the mod input here on a carry. Turn up the mod control. Now take a listen. So I'm just adding that kind of like little percussive scratching sound on top of that by hitting the filter here, and you could really play around with that and just add extra layers on top of your bass sound. And because you're doing it rhythmically and in time with the main clock, everything is going to say pretty much kind of to the same beat, and that always sounds really, really good. This is just a very basic take at setting up a techno case like this. You know, if I was going to do this in a more complex setup, I'd probably do a lot more kind of modulation that I could control manually, so that I'd be able to bring things in and out, so you can create a lot of interest. I'd probably also switch between these two sequencers here in Ornament and Crime, because then I could have two different melodies or even in two different keys, and I can create multiple tracks here on the Deluge as well to create different melodies into these guys. So there's a lot you can do with this setup. I mean, it's a very powerful setup, and we've only just scratched the surface. But there isn't enough time to go through everything, so hopefully this can get you started with some ideas for your own setup. I hope you found it useful. By all means, please do leave me some comments down below in the comment section. Tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, what you'd like to see in the future. And if you do like it, hit the old like button and subscribe so that you can get future videos from me. Thanks very much for watching. Now let's jam. This is a 3-voice case, and the 3 voices are the Instruo Ts-L, the Noise Engineering Manis Iteratis Alter, or BIA as I'll call it in the video, and the Noise Engineering Manis Iteratis. The Ts-L is your more traditional multi-waveform oscillator. It's a triangle core, and then you get a sub, and you get a triangle and a sine. But what's really nice about this is you have a wave folder and wave shaper, which you can CV modulate to really kind of take your waveforms into very, very kind of extreme places. The Bastel Ikari, or Ikari, I'm not too sure exactly how you pronounce it, is the filter I'm going to be using on the output stage for the BIA or the Manis. So the idea here is that these 3 are sort of the kind of core dirty industrial techno piece. I have an FX8 here, just a regular one for some delay on the BIA output, and then I can also use this dual FX from America Synths, which I'm going to use as dual delay as well. Then we have something I just built myself called Chasing Lights from STModular. It has a couple of nice features though. You can adjust the length of the sequences by just flicking some switches, and straight away that allows you to create interesting grooves and rhythms. It also has this sum output, and you can also contribute the triggers from different tracks to that sum. So you could sum all of the tracks together or just 2 of them, which gives you another rhythmic output possibility. This is one of my other favorite modules right now, the oscillator QARV. This is a quad attack release envelope generator and VCA. It really packs a ton into one module. You've got 4 channels of envelopes, which are just attack release envelopes, but they can be linear, they can be logarithmic. You can adjust the shape, you can invert them and attenuate them. You can of course make the attack and release stages different lengths. They can loop or be triggered, and best of all, they also have a built-in VCA. So you have an envelope here being triggered, either looping or from an external trigger. You can take that envelope to one place and use the VCA for something else. Finally, here we have an Ornament in Crime. Wouldn't be a Synth Dad video without an Ornament in Crime showing up. I got this Ornament in Crime Plus from Plum Audio to try out in video, so thank you to them for sending it to me. So you might be familiar with the more standard Ornament in Crime like this one here. What the Ornament in Crime Plus adds is negative voltage output. By pressing the VOR button here, variable output range, I can choose -3 to +7, -5 to +5, or 0 to 10 volts. Now this becomes very useful if you're generating envelopes, for example, or LFOs, or even for pitch generation, because you can pitch things down as well.